single father working Christmas Eve. The Apache woman who brought him fire changed everything. Mark sat in his old truck, the heater struggling to fight the December chill. Snowflakes fell lightly on the windshield, blurring the world outside into a quiet white haze. He rubbed his tired eyes and sighed. Another Christmas Eve, and here he was, driving home from a long night at the auto shop. The streets were nearly empty, except for the occasional car hurrying to finish last-minute shopping or visit family. For Mark, though, Christmas had lost much of its magic. It wasn't about presents anymore, or even festive lights. It was about making sure his daughter, Lily, had something to smile about, even if it was just a warm meal and a small stocking hung by the radiator. Mark glanced at the passenger seat. There, in the seat cover she had chosen herself last month, sat a small, worn backpack. Inside were Lily's favorite books, a stuffed rabbit she carried everywhere, and a carefully wrapped present he had bought with the last of his paycheck. It wasn't much, but he hoped it would make her feel special. He loved her more than anything in the world, but some days the weight of being both mother and father, provider and protector, pressed down so hard that it left him breathless. The shop had been busy all day. Cars with flat tires, engines that refused to start, and families rushing to finish errands before the holiday had kept him moving almost without pause. He remembered the look in the owner's eyes that morning, the expectation that everyone would work overtime. There was no way he could say no. Not now, not when bills were due and Lily needed school supplies for the new year. Mark had learned a long time ago that life didn't wait for anyone. He thought about Lily's mother, who had passed away when Lily was just a baby. He often wondered if she would have been proud of him, if she would see the effort he put in every single day just to keep their small family together. Sometimes, in the quiet moments when he cleaned the shop or drove home at night, he allowed himself a brief pang of sadness. Other times he'd pushed it aside, focusing on the little routines that kept their lives going, the breakfasts they shared, the bedtime stories, the small laughter that made his heart feel lighter. Tonight, though, even those small comforts seemed distant. The cold air seeped through the cracks in the truck door, making him shiver despite his thick coat. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. He thought about how he had promised Lily that he would be home early, that they would light the candles and decorate the small Christmas tree they had bought together. But promises sometimes had to bend to reality, and reality was cold and unyielding tonight. As he drove through the sleepy streets, he noticed the familiar sights of his neighborhood. The small houses, each decorated in its own way, reminded him of what the season was supposed to feel like. Twinkling lights in the windows, wreaths on doors, the faint smell of baking cookies drifting through the air. It was all a reminder of the warmth he longed to bring to Lily, but didn't always have the energy to create. He felt a twinge of guilt, thinking that maybe he was failing her somehow, that maybe his tiredness was stealing the joy she deserved. Mark's mind wandered to Lily's excitement earlier that day. She had run around the living room, her small feet tapping on the wooden floor, talking endlessly about Santa, reindeer, and the gifts she hoped would appear under the tree. He had smiled and nodded, trying to keep up with her energy, but inside he felt worn down. He wondered how many more Christmases he could manage alone, how long he could keep this fragile balance between work, responsibilities, and the small joys of family life. The sound of the engine humming under him was comforting in a strange way. It reminded him of the rhythm of his life. Work, home, small breaks, repeat. But tonight, it also reminded him that something felt missing. There was a quiet emptiness, an ache that he couldn't shake. He pulled his coat tighter around him and glanced at the rear-view mirror, where the faint outline of Lily's stuffed rabbit peeked out of the backpack. That small figure seemed to offer a silent reassurance, a reminder that love, even in exhaustion, could still shine through. Turning onto the side street that led to their home, Mark noticed something unusual. A faint glow flickered in the distance near the edge of the road. Curious, he slowed down, squinting through the falling snow. At first he thought it might be a reflection of a streetlight or someone's porch light, but as he got closer he realized it was something else. A small fire burning in a metal container, with a figure sitting beside it. The person was a woman wrapped in a thick shawl, her hands cupped around the warmth of the flames. Mark's first instinct was to drive past, to focus on getting home before Lily fell asleep. But something in the scene made him pause. There was a calmness to her presence, a quiet dignity that seemed out of place on a cold, lonely night. He rolled down his window slightly, the cold air rushing in, and called out, "Are you okay?" The woman looked up at him, her eyes steady and kind. She nodded. Without saying a word, she reached into the fire and picked up a small, burning stick, holding it out toward him. Mark hesitated, unsure of what to do. The gesture was simple, yet it felt significant, almost like an offering. He accepted it, careful not to burn his fingers, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through him. The fire crackled, tiny sparks flying upward, and for a moment, the exhaustion and weight pressing on his shoulders seemed to lift, if only slightly. Driving the last few blocks, Mark held the small flame carefully in a metal container he had in the truck. The warmth was comforting, but more than that, it stirred something inside him. It reminded him that even in the coldest, hardest moments, there could be sparks of hope, small gestures that could make a difference in someone's life. Tonight, he realized, wasn't just about survival. It was about connection, about passing on warmth, about showing Lily that even when life felt heavy, there was always room for light. When he finally arrived home, the house was quiet. Lily had already fallen asleep, her small chest rising and falling peacefully under the blanket he had tucked around her. Mark carefully placed the small flame on the table, watching it flicker. The room seemed to glow a little brighter, the shadows retreating from the corners. He sat down next to her, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead, and whispered a silent promise to himself that he would find ways, even in the simplest moments, to bring joy to her life. Mark leaned back in the chair, eyes fixed on the small flame, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and hope. He thought about the woman by the roadside, wondering who she was and why she had chosen to offer him that tiny spark. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was fate. Either way, he knew one thing. Tonight would be remembered, not for the long hours at work or the bills he had paid, but for the small, unexpected warmth that had reminded him of what mattered most. He didn't have a plan yet for how he would make Christmas special. The gifts were modest, the decorations few, and the house small. But he had something more important, a reminder that even in the darkest, coldest moments, a single spark could light the way. And as he watched the flame dance in the quiet room, Mark realized that maybe this Christmas, despite everything, would be different. Maybe it would be a Christmas of hope, of connection, and of rediscovered warmth, one that Lily would remember not for what they had, but for the love that bound them together. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white silence, but inside a small light burned steadily, promising that even on the loneliest nights, there was always a chance for warmth, for joy, and for a new beginning. Mark woke early the next morning, the small flame from the night before still flickering in the metal container on the kitchen table. Its gentle warmth seemed to fill the room, cutting through the cold that always crept into the corners of their little house. Lily was still asleep, curled under her blanket, her soft breathing steady and peaceful. Mark looked at her and felt that familiar mix of love and worry. He wanted to protect her from everything: hardship, loneliness, sadness, but he knew life wouldn't always allow that. Still, he could try. He could make small gestures, give little moments of warmth and joy, and hope they would grow into memories she would carry forever. The memory of the woman by the roadside kept returning to him. Who was she? Why had she stopped to offer a simple spark? Her eyes had been calm, her expression steady, but there was something almost knowing about her, as if she understood the weight he carried. Mark could not explain it, but the encounter had shaken something loose inside him. It had reminded him that the world could still hold small miracles, even in the most ordinary places. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the snow fall. The town was quiet, blanketed in white, with only the faint crunch of tires or footsteps breaking the silence. Mark knew he should start preparing for the day: breakfast, getting Lily ready, the little errands he had promised. But he couldn't tear his mind away from that image of the woman and the fire. There was something comforting about it, something that made him feel as though hope had returned to him in a simple, tangible form. When Lily finally stirred and climbed down from her bed, Mark tried to greet her with a smile, but the weariness in his face made it difficult. Still, her eyes lit up when she saw the small flame on the table. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, running toward it. "It's still burning." Mark chuckled softly. It is. We have a little fire this Christmas morning." "Ah." Lily sat beside him, her small hands hovering above the warmth. She leaned in closer, her eyes wide with wonder. "It feels nice," she whispered. "It's like it's alive." Mark nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Yes, it's alive, Lily. And I... And it's here to remind us that even when things are hard, we can still have warmth in our hearts." The day passed slowly. Mark and Lily made breakfast together, a simple meal of pancakes and syrup, but they laughed as they worked, and for a few hours, the house seemed brighter. Mark found himself telling Lily stories he hadn't shared before, stories about her mother, about his own childhood, and about small acts of kindness that had stayed with him through the years. Lily listened intently, her eyes shining with curiosity and wonder, and Mark realized that this sharing of memories was as important as any gift or decoration. By late afternoon, Mark felt the need to step outside. The snow had stopped falling, and the world was quiet, almost still. He wrapped himself in his coat and stepped onto the porch, the crunch of snow beneath his boots breaking the silence. He thought about the woman again, wondering if he could find her, or if she had already disappeared into the night like a spirit. He remembered the warmth of the fire, the calmness of her eyes, and the simple gesture of sharing a spark. It was a small thing, but it had changed something inside him. Mark decided to walk down the road where he had seen her the night before. He wanted to leave a small note or gift, a way of saying thank you, even though he didn't know if she would ever see it. As he walked, he noticed signs of life returning to the town. Neighbors shoveling snow, the faint smell of baked bread from a nearby house, the soft jingling of bells from a passing car. It reminded him that life was full of movement, full of small joys that could appear when least expected. When he reached the spot, the fire was gone. There was no sign of the woman, only a few footprints in the snow. Mark knelt down and brushed his gloved hand over the ground. leaving a small bundle of biscuits wrapped in paper. "Thank you," he whispered into the cold air, hoping the wind would carry his words. "Thank you for reminding me to keep hope alive." Walking back home, Mark felt a strange mix of emotions: gratitude, wonder, and a sense of connection to someone he had never really known. It was as if the small fire had sparked something inside him, something that had been buried under years of worry and exhaustion. For the first time in a long time, he felt the possibility of change, the possibility of better days ahead. That evening, Mark and Lily prepared a small fire in the fireplace. They collected kindling, lit the flames carefully, and watched as the fire grew, dancing and crackling. The warmth spread through the room, and for a few moments the hardships of the past months seemed to melt away. Mark saw Lily's eyes reflecting the light, full of joy and wonder, and he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that the real gift was not the fire itself, but the feeling it brought, a reminder that even in darkness there was warmth, and even in loneliness there was connection. After dinner, Mark tucked Lily into bed. She hugged the stuffed rabbit tightly and whispered, "Thank you, Daddy. This is the best Christmas ever." Mark kissed her forehead and smiled. "You're welcome, sweetheart. Remember, even the smallest spark can make a big difference." Later that night, Mark sat by the fire alone, reflecting on the day. The woman by the roadside had given him more than warmth. She had given him a new perspective. Life was still hard, and there were still challenges to face, but he felt ready to meet them with a renewed spirit. He thought about how he could carry this lesson forward, not just for himself, but for Lily. He wanted her to grow up understanding that kindness, generosity, and hope could make the world brighter, even in small ways. As the night deepened and the house grew quiet, Mark felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. The snow continued to fall softly outside, covering the world in white, but inside there was light and warmth, love and hope. He knew that the encounter with the Apache woman was something he would carry with him forever, a memory that would guide him, inspire him, and remind him of the power of small, meaningful gestures. Mark realized that Christmas wasn't just about gifts or decorations. It was about connection, about sharing warmth with others, and about finding hope even in difficult times. That small fire had taught him something he hadn't realized before, that life's most meaningful moments often came in unexpected ways, through strangers, simple acts of kindness, and the quiet magic of human connection. He smiled softly and closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the fire and the memory of the woman's eyes lingering in his mind. Tomorrow he would face new challenges, but tonight he allowed himself to simply be, to feel gratitude, hope, and the joy of a Christmas Eve that had started with a simple spark. And as he drifted off to sleep, Mark knew that this Christmas would mark a turning point, not because of gifts or decorations, but because of the lesson he had learned, that even the smallest flame could light up the darkest night, and even the simplest gesture could change a life forever. The morning after their quiet Christmas Eve, Mark woke to the soft, golden light of winter sun streaming through the frost-covered window. The little flame from the night before had burned down, leaving only a faint warmth on the metal container, but its memory lingered in his mind. He stretched his arms and listened to the house's quiet hum. Lily was still asleep, her soft breaths rising and falling like tiny waves. Mark smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of calm he hadn't known in months. He stepped into the kitchen and began preparing breakfast. It was a simple meal, oatmeal with a touch of cinnamon and brown sugar, accompanied by warm milk, but he approached it differently today. Instead of rushing through, he took his time, stirring carefully and setting the table neatly. Even small gestures now felt significant. and he realized that the little things could bring a lot of joy if given thought and care. When Lily finally came down the stairs, her eyes bright and full of excitement, Mark felt a surge of love. She ran to him and wrapped her tiny arms around his waist. "Good morning, Daddy. Can we make the fire again today?" she asked, bouncing on the balls of her feet. Mark chuckled softly and held her close. "We can, but today we'll do it together properly, like a little project. What do you think?" Lily clapped her hands in delight. "Yes, let's do it." They gathered small sticks and kindling from the backyard, careful not to bring anything too wet or large inside. Mark showed Lily how to arrange the wood, how to build a small pyramid that would catch fire easily. She listened intently, her small fingers mimicking his movements. He realized that this simple act, building a fire together, was teaching more than just warmth. It was teaching patience, care, and the quiet joy of creating something with one's own hands. As the flames finally caught and danced in the fireplace, Mark and Lily sat together, mesmerized. The fire crackled softly, casting warm light across their faces. Mark noticed something shifting inside him. It wasn't just about providing warmth anymore. It was about sharing moments, creating memories, and nurturing the heart in ways money or possessions could never do. "Daddy," Lily said quietly, "do you think the lady with the fire was magic?" Mark paused, considering her question. He could have laughed, brushed it off, or told her it was just a coincidence, but instead he decided to answer honestly. "I don't know if she was magic in the way we think of fairies or wizards," he said gently, "but she had a kind heart, and she showed me something important. Sometimes people can bring light into your life when you least expect it. That is a kind of magic, don't you think?" Lily nodded solemnly, her little eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "I want to be magic like that too," she whispered. "You already are," Mark said, feeling a lump in his throat. "Every kind thing you do, every smile you share, every time you care for someone, that's your magic." The rest of the morning passed in a quiet rhythm. They cleaned up, read stories, and even sang a few songs together. For Mark, it was an unusual kind of joy. Not loud or flashy, but deep and grounding. He noticed how Lily's laughter felt different now, lighter and freer, as if the warmth of the small fire had touched her heart as well. After lunch, Mark decided to take Lily for a walk through the neighborhood. The snow sparkled under the sunlight, and the cold air filled their lungs with freshness. It was the kind of day that reminded him of childhood winters, full of wonder and discovery. They passed by neighbors shoveling snow, children building snowmen, and families decorating their homes. Mark realized he had spent so many Christmases focused on worry and survival that he had forgotten how simple joys could bring a sense of life's beauty. As they walked, Mark shared stories of his own childhood winters. He told Lily about the time he had built a snow fort with his father, about the small handmade gifts his mother had given him, and about the lessons he had learned growing up. Lily listened with rapt attention, asking questions and laughing at his funny memories. Mark felt something shift inside him. Sharing these stories, teaching his daughter about life, and embracing the simple beauty around them. It was as if the small fire from the previous night had ignited something in his soul, a reminder of the goodness and warmth life could still offer. When they returned home, Mark decided to extend the lesson from the roadside encounter into something tangible. He gathered some blankets, a few small treats, and a thermos of hot cocoa. He and Lily wrapped up warmly and walked back toward the road where he had met the Apache woman. Though he did not expect to find her again, he wanted to leave a small gift, a gesture of gratitude and connection. When they reached the spot, The snow had covered the footprints from the previous night. The fire had long since died, and there was no sign of the woman. Still, Mark placed the blankets and cocoa carefully near the roadside, arranging them as thoughtfully as he could. Lily helped, her small hands smoothing the folds of the blankets and placing the treats on top. "Do you think she'll see it?" she asked, eyes wide. "I hope so," Mark replied. "Even if she doesn't, the act itself matters. Doing something kind can make a difference, even if we never know how." They stood for a few moments, feeling the quiet power of giving. The cold wind whispered around them, but the warmth in their hearts made the air feel lighter. For Mark, this act of generosity was a lesson he hoped to carry forward, not just during the holidays, but in every day of life. Walking back home, Mark noticed a shift in how he saw the world. People who had once seemed distant or busy now felt approachable, part of a shared human experience. He realized that the warmth he had received from a stranger's fire could be passed on, multiplied, and shared in countless ways. This realization gave him a new sense of purpose, to live with kindness, to teach Lily the value of generosity, and to recognize the small sparks that could change lives. That evening, back in the warmth of their home, Mark and Lily settled by the fireplace again. Lily held her stuffed rabbit close while Mark watched the flames dance. "Daddy," she said softly, "I think magic is real. Not like in stories, but in people." Mark smiled, feeling tears prick his eyes. "You're right, Lily. Magic is real. It lives in the hearts of people who care, who give, and who love." They spent the evening quietly, reading, talking, and sharing small moments of joy. Mark felt a sense of peace he had not experienced in years. The encounter with the Apache woman had taught him more than he had expected. It was not just about the fire, but about connection, generosity, and seeing the light in small things. He began to understand that life's most meaningful lessons often arrived quietly, without fanfare, but left a lasting impact if one was willing to notice. As Lily drifted off to sleep that night, Mark remained by the fire. He reflected on the past, on the struggles he had faced, and on the small sparks of hope that had appeared along the way. The fire from the previous night had not only warmed his hands, it had warmed his heart, teaching him the power of kindness and human connection. He realized that he could not change the past, but he could shape the future. He could create a life filled with warmth, generosity, and love for his daughter. Mark smiled softly as he watched the fire. The flickering flame seemed to echo the lessons he had learned, that even the smallest acts of care could light up the darkest nights, that warmth could be shared in countless ways, and that hope could always be found if one was willing to look for it. And in that quiet room, with snow blanketing the world outside and the fire casting a golden glow, Mark understood something profound. Life's most powerful magic was not in grand gestures or perfect moments, but in small, thoughtful acts of love. A shared fire, a kind word, a gesture of giving. These were the things that could transform ordinary days into memories that last a lifetime. Mark looked toward Lily, sleeping peacefully, and whispered softly, "Thank you for showing me the magic of life, even in the simplest moments." The warmth of the fire filled the room, and for the first time in a long time, Mark felt truly alive, ready to face the challenges ahead with hope, courage, and a renewed heart. The spark he had received from a stranger had grown into a flame that would continue to guide him and Lily through life's darkest winters. The morning after the quiet lessons of the small fire, Mark woke with a renewed sense of purpose. The world outside was still blanketed in snow, the streets silent except for the faint crunch of tires on the icy roads. The sunlight glinted off the rooftops, making the snow sparkle as though it were covered with tiny diamonds. Mark breathed deeply, letting the crisp winter air fill his lungs, and felt a strange mixture of calm and excitement. Today, he decided, he would take the small spark of warmth and hope he had received and turn it into something bigger, not just for himself, but for Lily and the people around them. Lily was already awake, hopping out of bed with the same energy that had filled the previous day. "Daddy, can we do something fun today?" she asked, eyes bright. "Yes, Lily," Mark replied, smiling. "But first, we're going to do something very special. We're going to make Christmas this year about more than just gifts. Gifts are wasted. We're going to make it about kindness and sharing our warmth with others." "How do we do that?" Mark thought for a moment. He remembered the roadside woman who had given him the spark of fire. He remembered the feeling of warmth both in his hands and in his heart, and he realized that giving that kind of feeling to others might be the most important gift he could give. "We're going to help people today, Lily," he said. "Small things, but meaningful things. We're going to be a little spark in someone else's life." Lily's face lit up. "I like that. I want to help too." They spent the morning preparing small bundles to give to neighbors and strangers. Mark collected blankets, warm socks, and a few small treats he had bought earlier. Lily helped carefully arrange each item in a neat pile, wrapping them in paper and tying them with string. "These are little gifts from us," Mark explained. "Gifts that show people they are cared for, that someone is thinking of them." Once the bundles were ready, they put on their coats, hats, and gloves, and stepped out into the bright, snowy day. Mark held Lily's hand as they walked through the quiet streets, carrying the first bundle. They approached the first house, a small home where an elderly woman lived alone. Her lights were on, but she looked tired, a hint of loneliness in her eyes. Mark knocked gently, and when the woman opened the door, he smiled warmly. "Good morning," he said. "We wanted to bring you a small gift, just something to help keep you warm and remind you that someone is thinking of you this Christmas." The woman's eyes widened in surprise. She took the bundle slowly, her hands trembling slightly. "Oh, this is so kind of you," she said softly, her voice cracking with emotion. "I wasn't expecting anything. Thank you, both of you." Lily stepped forward shyly. "Merry Christmas," she said. Her voice was small but filled with sincerity. The woman smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. "Merry Christmas, dear, you've made my day." Mark and Lily continued down the street, delivering bundles to neighbors, a few people living alone, and even a homeless man sitting quietly by a corner. Each time Mark noticed something remarkable. The small gesture of kindness sparked a reaction stronger than he had imagined. Smiles appeared, eyes lit up, and sometimes people even hugged the gifts as though they were treasures. Lily watched in wonder, seeing firsthand how small acts of generosity could bring so much joy. By the afternoon, Mark felt a new sense of energy. The exhaustion of the past days, the heavy burden of responsibility, seemed lighter. He realized that sharing warmth with others not only helped them, but helped him and Lily feel more connected, more alive. Each gift was more than an object. It was a symbol of care, love, and human connection. When they returned home for a brief rest, Mark and Lily sat by the fireplace once again, the flames casting a gentle glow around the room. "Daddy," Lily said softly, "I think the lady with the fire would be proud of us." Mark nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "I think she would." "Ah, she showed me how important it is to share warmth and kindness. And now, we're doing the same for others. Inspired by the morning's work, Mark decided to take the effort a step further. He remembered a small community center nearby that often helped families in need, especially during the holidays. He gathered some of the remaining blankets, treats, and small gifts and set out with Lily to deliver them. When they arrived, the staff greeted them warmly, impressed by the generosity of the small family bringing support. "This is wonderful," said one of the volunteers. "These gifts will mean so much to the children and families we help. Thank you for thinking of them." Mark smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "We wanted to make sure that people feel cared for this Christmas, even if it's in a small way. Sometimes a little spark can make a big difference." Lily helped distribute the gifts to children who came by the center, seeing the excitement and happiness on their faces. Her laughter was contagious, and Mark felt a joy that went deeper than anything he had experienced in a long time. It was a joy rooted in connection, kindness, and the understanding that the world could be better when people cared for one another. As the afternoon turned into evening, Mark reflected on the events of the day. The simple spark he had received from a stranger had grown into something much larger than he could have imagined. It had not only given him hope, but had allowed him to spread that hope to others. He realized that the magic of that encounter was not in fire alone. It was in the act of noticing, caring, and acting with compassion. Returning home with Lily, Mark felt a renewed sense of gratitude. He had worked hard to provide for his daughter, but this day had taught him that providing love, attention, and connection was just as important as providing food or shelter. As they settled by the fireplace, Lily climbed onto his lap, holding her rabbit tightly. "Daddy, today felt magical," she whispered. Mark kissed her forehead and smiled. "It was magical, Lily. But the magic comes from people caring for each other, from small gestures that make someone feel loved." They spent the rest of the evening preparing a small dinner together, simple but joyful. The house felt warmer than ever, not just from the fire in the hearth, but from the warmth in their hearts. They talked about the people they had helped, the smiles they had seen, and the way a small act of kindness could ripple outward in ways they might never fully understand. Before bedtime, Mark tucked Lily in and whispered a promise. "Tomorrow and every day after, we'll keep this spark alive. We'll look for ways to help, to care, and to share warmth with others. That's the true spirit of Christmas." Lily hugged him tightly. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Lily," he replied, feeling a sense of contentment he had never known before. After she fell asleep, Mark stayed by the fire, reflecting on the journey of the past 2 days. He thought about the woman who had started it all, about the spark she had given him, and about the ways that spark had grown into a flame that touched not just him, but his daughter and the people around them. He realized that life's most meaningful moments often came quietly, without fanfare, through simple acts of love and generosity. Mark smiled, feeling a sense of peace and hope. The fire in the hearth flickered and danced, reminding him that warmth could spread in countless ways, and that even the smallest gesture could change a life. He understood that this Christmas was different, not because of gifts or decorations, but because of the power of human connection, the joy of giving, and the courage to share warmth with others. As the night deepened and the house grew quiet, Mark knew one thing for certain: the spark that had been given to him would continue to grow. It would guide him, inspire him, and remind him that even in the coldest, hardest times, there was always hope, light, and the power to make a difference. And in that quiet room, with the fire casting a golden glow and the snow falling softly outside, Mark felt truly alive. The spark had become a flame. The warmth had spread, and the lessons of kindness and connection had taken root in both his and Lily's hearts. This was a Christmas neither of them would ever forget. A Christmas of love, generosity, and the quiet magic that could be found in even the smallest acts of care. The morning of Christmas finally arrived, and Mark woke to a quiet house filled with soft, golden light. Outside, the snow had settled into a thick, sparkling blanket, making the world feel still and peaceful. He looked over at Lily, who was already awake, her small face pressed against the window as she watched the snow fall, and her eyes were wide with excitement, and for the first time in many years, Mark felt a Christmas full of hope, warmth, and possibility. He got out of bed carefully so as not to wake her, and went to the kitchen. The fire in the hearth had burned low, leaving behind glowing embers that filled the room with a soft warmth. Mark smiled to himself. This year was not about presents, not about fancy decorations or perfect meals. It was about love, kindness, and the memories they would create together. When Lily finally turned to see him, her face lit up. "Daddy, is it time?" she asked, bouncing on her heels. "Yes, it's time," Mark replied, his voice soft but full of joy. "But first we have a little surprise." He led her to the living room, where a small Christmas tree stood decorated with homemade ornaments and a few lights. Beneath it were the modest gifts he had carefully wrapped. But there was something more important, a warmth in the room that came from the fire and the love in their hearts. Lily's eyes widened in wonder, and she ran to hug him tightly. "Daddy, this is the best Christmas ever!" she exclaimed, her voice full of excitement. Mark laughed, feeling tears prick his eyes. "It's just the beginning, Lily. Today we'll make it even more special." After breakfast, Mark and Lily bundled up and set out to continue their small mission of kindness. They visited neighbors who had been alone, left small gifts of blankets and treats for those in need, and even stopped by the local shelter to share some of the remaining bundles they had prepared. Each act brought smiles, laughter, and warmth, not just to those receiving the gifts, but to Mark and Lily as well. Lily's eyes sparkled with every thank you, every hug, every look of surprise and happiness they received. "Daddy," she said quietly as they walked home, "I think people are happier because of us." Mark smiled, squeezing her hand. "Yes, Lily." And that happiness spreads. Just like the fire we built together, it grows when shared. That's what the woman by the roadside taught me. One small spark can make a big difference. When they returned home, Mark decided to make a special dinner for just the two of them. It wasn't elaborate, just a roast chicken, some mashed potatoes, and a few vegetables, but it was prepared with care and love. As they ate, they talked about the people they had helped, the smiles they had seen, and the lessons they had learned. For Mark, it was a moment of clarity. He realized that Christmas was not measured by what you bought, but by what you gave from your heart, by the love and care you shared. After dinner, Mark and Lily settled by the fire once again. The flames danced and crackled, casting a warm glow across the room. Lily held her rabbit tightly, leaning against her father. "Daddy," she said softly, "do you think the woman with the fire knew we would do all this?" Mark thought for a moment, remembering the calm, knowing eyes of the stranger. "I don't know," he said gently. "Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. What matters is that she showed me the way. She reminded me that small acts of kindness can grow into something bigger. And that is exactly what we've done." Lily nodded, her small face thoughtful. "I think she would be proud of us." Mark smiled, feeling a lump in his throat. "I think she would, too." As the evening approached, Mark felt a quiet peace settle over him. He reflected on the past few days, the exhaustion, the worry, the loneliness, and realized that something had changed. The spark from the roadside fire had not only warmed his hands, it had transformed his heart. He saw now that life's most meaningful moments came not from grand gestures, but from small acts of love and kindness. He had shared that spark with Lily, and together they had spread warmth to others, creating a ripple that extended beyond their little home. Mark looked out the window at the snow-covered streets. People were walking, laughing and waving to one another. He saw neighbors helping neighbors shovel driveways, children building snowmen, and families stepping outside to enjoy the beauty of the day. Everything felt connected, as though the warmth they had shared had become part of the larger world, spreading quietly from heart to heart. Lily climbed onto his lap, resting her head against his chest. "Daddy," she whispered, "I think this is the best Christmas ever. Not because of the presents, but because of everything we did together." Mark held her close, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "You're right, Lily. The best moments in life are the ones we share with others, the love we give and the kindness we show. That's the real magic of Christmas." As the night deepened, Mark realized there was one more thing he wanted to do. He went to the roadside where he had first met the Apache woman, carrying a small lantern and a note of thanks. Lily walked beside him, her small hand in his. They placed the lantern gently on the snow, and Mark carefully set the note beside it. "To the woman who shared her fire with me," he wrote. "You showed me the power of kindness and hope. Because of you, my daughter and I have learned the true meaning of Christmas. Thank you." They stood quietly for a moment, letting the stillness of the night wash over them. The snow glowed softly in the lantern's light, and Mark felt a sense of closure and gratitude. Whether the woman ever saw the note or not, he knew the act mattered. The spark she had given him had grown, multiplied, and transformed their lives. Walking back home, Mark felt lighter than he had in years. The weight of responsibility, the worry, and the loneliness had not disappeared entirely, but they no longer felt overwhelming. He had discovered something far more valuable than money or gifts: the ability to give, to share warmth, and to connect with others in meaningful ways. And in doing so, he had created a legacy of love and kindness for Lily to carry forward. Back home, Mark and Lily settled by the fire one last time for the night. The room was quiet, except for the gentle crackling of the flames. Lily's eyes were heavy with sleep, but her smile was content and peaceful. Mark kissed her forehead softly and whispered, "Thank you for sharing this Christmas with me, Lily." "You've taught me as much as I've taught you," Lily murmured softly. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart," he replied, his heart full. Mark stayed awake a little longer, watching the fire, reflecting on the past few days, and thinking about the woman who had unknowingly changed his life. He realized that true magic was not in supernatural acts, but in the courage to care, the willingness to act with love, and the small sparks that could ignite hope in others. That realization would stay with him forever, guiding him through future challenges and reminding him that even in the coldest winters, warmth could always be found. Outside, the snow continued to fall softly, covering the world in white silence. Inside, the little house glowed with firelight, love, and laughter. Mark understood that Christmas was not just a day, but a feeling of connection, hope, and shared humanity. And for him and Lily, this Christmas would be remembered forever, not because of gifts or decorations, but because of the spark that had been shared, the warmth that had been spread, and the love that had grown in both their hearts. As he finally closed his eyes, Mark felt a deep sense of gratitude. The spark of fire had come from a stranger, yet it had become a flame that touched their lives, shaping the way they saw the world and the way they lived each day. He knew that he would carry the lessons of this Christmas always, that kindness matters, that love matters, and that even the smallest spark could light the darkest night. And in the quiet of the house, with the fire still glowing softly and the snow glistening outside, Mark felt a peace and joy that would stay with him and Lily for a lifetime. This Christmas had changed everything, not because of what they had, but because of what they gave, shared, and learned together. The spark had grown into a flame, and that flame would guide them always, reminding them of the true magic of life.